What's going on there, YouTube, and welcome back to another comic book video. Alright guys, so we are going to continue our coverage over the Supergirl storyline where basically she became a Red Lantern. Yes, you heard that right. And matter of fact, it took place in the New 52. Now, if you're wondering what is the New 52, because maybe you forgot about it or possibly you're new to DC Comics, when it came to the New 52, it was this bright idea DC had where they wanted to restart their entire universe. And so they cancel all their books left and right and say, we are going to do a complete reboot, which they somewhat did. That right there is honestly a total different video because it wasn't really a complete reboot. Either way though, they did do a reboot in some way and everybody had a #1 issue. Now, Supergirl was one of the characters that got a brand new series to go alongside with Superman because again, Superman is one of the top characters in DC Comics. He has his own super family and so they gave him a book, her a book, and also Superboy. Either way though, when it came to Supergirl, she was basically angry the entire time in the New 52. Like literally, a lot of different fans of Supergirl were kind of saying this was kind of like the worst version of Supergirl because she was always angry. And matter of fact, a lot of times when it came to her problems, they only got worse because of her anger, because she wouldn't actually sit down and think things through before actually doing something. And that was the biggest problem with her entire series. Now, after a couple years in the New 52 with Supergirl, somebody finally sat down and said, you know what would be a good idea? Turn her into a Red Lantern. Now, Red Lanterns are basically enemies to Green Lanterns because remember, originally we only had the Green Lanterns and they were made to, of course, police the universe. But when it comes to the Green Lanterns, they're all about willpower. But over the years in DC Comics, we did get other kinds of lanterns, blue, yellow, indigo, pink, so on and so on. But when it came to the Red Lanterns, they tap into a different emotion, and that emotion is rage. And so it made sense for Supergirl to become a Red Lantern, which she did. Now, at this point in the storyline, Supergirl is no longer a Red Lantern, but she's still part of this overall story that was happening in Red Lantern comics, which was the return of Atrocitus. So let me explain. So before Supergirl had actually joined the Red Lanterns, Atrocitus was actually defeated by Gardner. Now that name should sound somewhat familiar. If not, it's okay. But when it came to Gardner, he was actually the second Green Lantern after Hal Jordan. But either way, in the New 52, he actually left the Green Lanterns. And the reason why, because he felt like he no longer belonged there. He felt like his better purpose in life was to join the Red Lanterns, which he actually did. Now, when he did that, he was also a spy for Hal Jordan. Now, over the time being a Red Lantern, he realized he actually liked the idea of being a Red Lantern because just like Supergirl, the dude was always angry and he fit perfectly with the Red Lanterns. Now, with all that information being told you guys all at once, Gardner actually defeated Atrocitus and he did become the new leader of the Red Lanterns. The problem was Atrocitus came back, and when he did, it kind of led to this civil war over the last few issues of Red Lanterns, Green Lanterns, and also Supergirl right in the middle of the New 52. And so that is why we're going to continue this storyline because it does get wrapped up. Supergirl is still somewhat involved in this storyline, even though she's no longer a Red Lantern. And the reason why she's no longer a Red Lantern, because what happened in our last video, she was able to remove the Red Lantern ring, which honestly, it shouldn't happen, but it did. And she was able to get rid of the idea of her being a Red Lantern and just being a regular Supergirl once again. But she's still going to help the Red Lanterns fight against Atrocitus in the storyline and to hopefully defeat him. Because right now, with him being back, he has his own group, and you do have a civil war between Atrocitus and Gardner in the Red Lantern Corps to basically see who is going to be the new leader of the Red Lanterns. But then we actually pick up with Red Lantern Annual #1. Now, when it comes to an annual, it usually always has more pages than a regular book would have. And so for this case, it's the same thing. Red Lantern Annual #1 has more pages, which honestly works out because it does help tell this story, this big battle between Atrocitus and Guy Gardner, and also gives us an idea what we could possibly see in the future in later books if we do cover the rest of Red Lantern series in the new 52. Either way, when it comes to annual #1 of Red Lanterns, when we actually jump into the storyline, we see Atrocitus at Earth right now. And of course, Earth is the home world to Guy Gardner, the other leader of the Red Lanterns. And Atrocitus is plotting to actually attack Earth. Now, when he does attack Earth, he does attack different parts of Earth that were basically taught to another Red Lantern who has supposedly betrayed Guy Gardner, and that is Skiltrox. And I really hope I pronounced his name correctly. But when it comes to that Red Lantern right there, Skillox, he actually left Guy Gardner and joined Atrocitus. And so this is Atrocitus still looking at Skillox as a betrayer, someone he cannot trust, a traitor, but he's kind of like, hey, listen, I need all the information that you have learned from Guy Gardner about Earth. And you do have Skillox tell Atrocitus, okay, so he cares about these 3 different locations around the Earth, but also some areas as well. And so we do see Atrocitus attack the home city of Guy Gardner, but also some very important locations as well. But this is Atrocitus doing this for one more particular reason. Yes, to get back at Guy Gardner, but to also give birth to more Red Lanterns, an army of Red Lanterns, because that is the moment we see we see Atrocitus tell another Red Lantern to go ahead and release the rings. And you have this other Red Lantern open up its mouth, and tons and tons and tons of Red Lantern rings just fall out of his mouth, and they all go down to Earth. And the reason why Atrocitus is doing this is because, again, he wants to build up his number for the big battle against him and Guy Gardner. But he knows this is going to work because with Earth just being attacked and the people of Earth losing some things here and there because of Atrocitus' attack, they're going to be very angry. And with them being very angry, it's going to make them the perfect host to become Red Lanterns alongside with Atrocitus and the rest of his Red Lanterns. And so this is giving Atrocitus what he wanted, an army of Red Lanterns to take out Guy Gardner, and then after that, any other enemies out there who may stand in the way of Atrocitus and his goals. But then we jump over to Guy Gardner and his group of Red Lanterns. And right now you do have Guy Gardner and his group trying to find Atrocitus, trying to figure out where in the world did Atrocitus actually go to. Now they're on the Kelvar, which is actually their ship to use as a way to travel across the universe and also save their Red Lantern energy so that they'll be better in battle. Either way though, as they're traveling across the universe, trying to figure out where in the world is Atrocitus, that is the moment you have Guy Gardner and his group find out that basically Atrocitus is right now at Earth, which means that he's attacking the Earth. And for Guy Gardner, that is a huge no-no. You're attacking my homeworld, and I don't like that. And so you have Guy Gardner tell the rest of his group, we're going to Earth to basically stop Atrocitus here and now. But then we actually jump back over to Atrocitus, who's right now kind of enjoying himself. And the reason why, because he's watching his army come to life. He's seeing more and more people of Earth actually becoming Red Lanterns. And he's kind of like, yes, my army is coming to life. More and more people are coming to my side, and this is great. Now, you did have Skalox actually ask Atrocitus, can he give one of those Red Lantern rings to somebody that he actually cares for? Now, for Atrocitus, he's wondering, why in the world should I help you out, Skalox? Because you're the person who had betrayed me. You joined Guy Gardner's side, and then you betrayed him once you realized I was going to win, and you came back to my side. So why in the world should I basically help you out by giving one of my Red Lantern rings to somebody that you care for. Now, of course, over time, you do have Atrocitus say yes, but he's not saying yes to help out Skylox. He's really saying yes because it's someone else also joining his army. And if Skylox actually cares for that person, then Atrocitus really wants that person on his side to use later to possibly hurt Skylox down the road. But getting back over to Blease, when we actually do pick up with Blease, we have to remember that she was one of the Red Lanterns that had joined Atrocitus originally when the Red Lanterns came together. But when Guy Gardner showed up and wanting to make things better for the Red Lanterns, she actually joined Guy Gardner wanting to be a better Red Lantern. Now, with that being said, though, there was another Red Lantern that she cared for, which was Rancor. And Rancor is actually from Earth. Matter of fact, he was the first Red Lantern from Earth. Either way, he was also on Guy Gardner's side. And they were all good Red Lanterns. The problem was, though, Rancor was actually captured by Atrocitus earlier in this series. And when he was captured by Atrocitus, Atrocitus turned Rancor back to the first state of a Red Lantern. And what I mean by that is, when it comes to a Red Lantern, when they become a Red Lantern at the very beginning, they are just completely insane. They're full of rage. They're running around the universe as a Red Hulk, basically. But once your body is dropped into the Lake of Blood or Lake of Yzma, it does have different names, then you regain your sanity. You're back to normal. But with Atrocitus, he turned Rancor back into that first state of mind of a Red Lantern, just full of rage. And so Blease has been hoping that there is a way to turn Rancor back into a regular, normal Red Lantern once again. But what she sees right now, the possibility that she may never see that actually happen at all. But then we jump over to Gotham City. Now, when we do, we actually pick up with Batman right now battling against an army of new Red Lanterns that had came from Earth, or when Atrocitus had attacked the Earth and ticked off a few Earthlings and turned them into Red Lanterns. Either way, while you have Batman battling against these armies of Red Lanterns, you do have Guy Gardner appear. And when he does, he tries to help out Batman. But this also shows that these two characters do not like each other at all, especially Batman to Guy Gardner, because these two characters, they have a long history with one another. And so it's Batman still showing that he does not trust any kind of lanterns at all, but especially he does not trust Guy at all, because Guy and Hal really tick off Batman a lot of different times. John gets a pass most times, but Hal and Guy definitely don't. And so this is Bruce kind of like, you're telling me that you're going to have a way to actually handle this problem. But what I see right now is that you don't have a way to actually handle this problem. And so I see you being a failure once again. But this is Guy Gardner saying, I'm going to show you that I can actually do this and save the Earth. Now, as Guy Gardner leaves, it's Batman wondering, is Guy trying to show Bruce Wayne off? Like, hey, let me show you what I can actually do. Or is it Guy Gardner trying to tell himself that he's actually a great hero and he can actually handle this problem? But then we jump over to Skylox. Now, when we do, we actually do see Skylox meeting up with the person that he wanted Atrocitus to turn into a Red Lantern. And that character is Shadow Thief. Now, Shadow Thief is honestly not that very important for this storyline or a character at all, but the only thing you need to know is that when Skylox had joined Guy Gardner's Red Lantern group and Guy Gardner began to protect the Earth, well, he did have a few run-ins to Shadow Thief, and Shadow Thief and Skylox did kind of build something between each other. And so it's him saying, listen, I asked Atrocitus to make you a Red Lantern, which right now you're full of rage because, like I said earlier, when someone becomes a Red Lantern, they're just full of rage. And so this is Skylox kind of like, I want to help you out. I know you're full of rage right now, but let me begin to help you so that you'll be able to regain your sanity. But then we actually pick up with Supergirl. Now, when we do, this is Supergirl reminding us that she remembers what these new Red Lanterns are actually going through. And the reason why, because remember, when you first become a Red Lantern, you're just insane. You're literally going around full of rage like a Red Hulk left and right. It's not until you put your body in a lake of blood or the lake of Yzmont is when you regain your sanity. And so this is Supergirl remembering, but also reminding us that when she first became a Red Lantern, it was the same thing. That basically she just went around the world or the universe completely full of rage. She was insane until they put her body in the lake of blood or the lake of Yzmont as a way for her to regain her sanity. And so this is her kind of telling us that she knows what these new Red Lanterns are actually going through. Now, she does run into Guy Gardner, and when she does, this is Guy Gardner actually very surprised to see that she's no longer a Red Lantern, because in our last video, that was the moment where she stopped being a Red Lantern, which honestly, I still hate the way they actually did it, because when it comes to a Red Lantern, when you first get your ring, that ring replaces your heart, meaning that if you do remove that ring, you will die. And so when Supergirl did remove her ring, she should have died. But because she was supercharged, thanks to the sun, she was able to skip over that effect and just come back normal. Either way, it's her telling Guy Gardner that she's here to help him solve this problem right now, which means they're going to work together to deal with this new Red Lantern army problem. But then we actually pick up with Zox. Now remember, Zox is another member of Guy Gardner's Red Lantern group, except he's not with Guy Gardner and the rest of them trying to defend the Earth. Instead, he took the ship they used to travel across the universe to find the home world that Atrocitus is using right now as his new base, because Atrocitus' old base got taken up by Guy Gardner and his group of Red Lanterns. And so this is Zox going on a special mission to actually find the new homeworld base that Atrocitus is using, which he does find. And when he does find it, he begins to attack the place. Now, at this new base of Atrocitus, Atrocitus did build a new lake of blood, which is very important because if you're a new Red Lantern, your body has to be dropped in the lake of blood as a way for you to regain your sanity. And so with that, you have Zox saying, you know what? No, his new lake and his new home is about to get wrecked. And so you have Zox just shoot down a ton of missiles to destroy the entire area that Atrocitus was using as his new base on this random world. Now, when Zox did that, there were two Red Lanterns that were actually left behind by Atrocitus to protect this place. Now, of course, they have failed, but one of those guys, he wants his ship back. And that ship is the same one that Guy Gardner and his group actually use. And so this is him saying, hey, you and me, buddy, are going to get my spaceship back from Zox because that's my ship. But also we're going to make Atrocitus proud. Now, don't worry, because we actually do have somebody on the inside who could actually help us take over that spaceship. And that person on the inside is actually Rancor. Now remember, Rancor was turned into an insane Red Lantern once again thanks to Atrocitus. But we come to find out that Rancor is not completely insane, that he does have control over a tad bit of his sanity. Either way, we do see Rancor right now being able to actually get out of his cell. And the reason why, because the spaceship that the Red Lanterns actually owned, it was owned by someone else. And that person was one of the two Red Lanterns that was protecting Atrocitus' new base. And because that was his spaceship first, he knows the codes to everything. And so he tells Rancor the code to get out of his cell and to hopefully take over the spaceship. And then that will give Atrocitus something else against Guy Gardner. But then we pick up with Blease. Now, right now, you have Blease teaming up with an alien race known as Cormoraki, and I really hope I pronounced that name correctly. But when it comes to the Cormorakis, they are actually a group of aliens that Guy Gardner's Red Lantern group had actually saved in the earlier book. And with that being said, this is now the Cormorakis coming to Blease and Guy Gardner saying, because you guys helped us out earlier, it's now time for us to help you guys out. And so what the Cormorakis are actually doing is they have a special kind of beam of light that can actually come down a Red Lantern, which honestly is a great thing to use, because that means the thousands of Red Lanterns that have popped up on Earth are right now being calmed down by this new beam of light that Cormorakis are using from their spaceship. And so it shows that Guy Gardner kind of knew what Atrocitus was trying to do. And so with the Red Lanterns of Earth beginning to calm down, that actually hurts Atrocitus' numbers. But getting back over to Zox in his spaceship that he's using right now as a way to attack the new base of Atrocitus, he realized that his weapons are being turned off. And he's very confused on why in the world that's actually happening. And that is the moment he's confronted by Rancor, because Rancor has all the codes that he needs to basically take over the ship. Because again, this ship was owned by someone else before Zox. And so that guy told Rancor all the different codes he needs to basically take over the ship. Now for Zox, he's kind of like, wait a second. I see how you're acting right now. The way you're acting. You were never crazy. You were never insane. You were actually on Atrocitus' side. You're a traitor to Guy Gardner after everything he did for you. And so you kind of have Rancor confirm that technically he was never crazy. That matter of fact, he was always on Atrocitus' side. And then you have Rancor actually punch a hole right through Zox's head. And we're left to believe that he had just killed off Zox, someone that he had fought alongside with for so many years. But on top of that, Zox also was very close to Rancor. And so now is Zox realizing that a dear friend of his had just betrayed him and had possibly killed him. But then we jump back over to Atrocitus, and when we do, we actually do see Atrocitus right now thinking that he has won, because he did attack the ship that was using that beam of light as a way to calm down the new Red Lanterns, and he has captured Blease as well. But while he's giving his super villain speech over to her, well, that is the moment you do have Supergirl and Guy Gardner appear, and when they do, that means we're about to have another battle between Atrocitus and Guy Gardner, but this time with Supergirl on their side. But getting back over to Rancor, this is the moment we kind of find out that Rancor was never actually insane again. That matter of fact, he was being controlled. Because what Atrocitus did actually was he had a Red Lantern that had the ability to be a parasite. And they put that parasite inside the body of Rancor. And that parasite basically took over Rancor's body and made everyone believe that two things. One, that Rancor was insane again. And two, that he had actually betrayed Guy Gardner and rejoined Atrocitus' side. But to only find out that he was being controlled by some kind of parasite. And so you do have Rancor actually take the parasite out of his body, kills the parasite, and then takes the parasite Red Lantern ring. So now Rancor has another Red Lantern ring on his side. But then he realized that Zox is about to die. Now, Zox is not going to die right here, right now, but he's going to die later on in the story after he does one more thing to help Guy Gardner actually win the war against Atrocitus. And what you have Zox about to do is actually take the spaceship that, again, he had apparently stolen, but use that spaceship to do a very huge amount of damage to Atrocitus' new area. And so he takes that spaceship and just crashes it right into Atrocitus' new home. And when he does that right there, there's a whole lot of damage. A lot of deaths involved as well too. Those two Red Lanterns that were left behind to protect the area, yeah, they're definitely dead. But this is Zox making sure that when Atrocitus comes back, he has nothing to come back to. But of course, Zox died alongside with the ship. And so that is the death of Zox, one of the members of Guy Gardner's Red Lanterns, he died hoping to actually help Guy Gardner win the war against Atrocitus. But then we jump back over to Blease and Guy Gardner. Now, when we do, we actually pick up with Guy Gardner and Blease deciding to use blood magic as a way to control the new Red Lanterns from Earth. Now, when it comes to Blease, she is good at blood magic, but she's not as good as Atrocitus is. And so when she does use blood magic with the help of Guy Gardner, she was able to gain control of some of the new Red Lanterns from Earth. But the problem is, though, not all of them. And the question is, though, where are the rest of the Red Lanterns from Earth, the ones that Atrocitus had made? And we come to find out that Atrocitus and his new army, they're somewhere else. And so he is literally getting ready for one big, huge battle against Guy Gardner, because now he has an army to basically back him up. But then we jump into the final chapter of today's storyline, where we actually pick up with Supergirl, Guy Gardner, and Blease fighting against an army of Red Lanterns. But while fighting against an army of Red Lanterns, you have Guy Gardner realize that they have to retreat. Now, of course, you do have Supergirl tell Blease and Guy Gardner that they need to retreat, but she's going to stay behind. And the reason why, because Guy Gardner is probably the best person to figure out a way to actually defeat Atrocitus. And so he needs to stay alive. And so is Supergirl saying, let me basically sacrifice myself to stop these Red Lanterns who are all working for Atrocitus, while you and Blease go ahead and try to find a way to actually defeat Atrocitus. So go ahead and leave, which they do. But then we actually pick up with Skylox. Now, when we do, we actually do see Skylox going to the new home world that Atrocitus is using as his base. Because this was Skylox hoping that with everybody being busy, he'll be able to take his girlfriend Shadow Thief to the Lake of Blood or the Lake of Yzmont. And the reason why, because when it comes to Shadow Thief, she just became a Red Lantern. And when you become a Red Lantern, at first, you're basically crazy. And so this was Skylox hoping that he'll take his girlfriend to the Lake of Blood to help control her sanity. The problem is, though, Rancor comes to him and tell him, hey man, you're late. Zox basically crashed our spaceship into the lake and got rid of it. And so the Lake of Blood, the Lake of Yzmont, is no more, which means Shadow Thief is basically stuck in this position. Now, with that being said, this is also the moment we kind of find out that Skylox was actually never betraying Guy Gardner and his group. That in reality, he was a spy for Guy Gardner to spy on Atrocitus. So when he had rejoined Atrocitus' side and we were left to believe that he had betrayed Guy Gardner, in reality, no, he was a spy for Guy Gardner. But now Skylox feel like he was a failure as a spy, but also a failure as a boyfriend. Because right now it seems like his group, him and Guy Gardner and the rest of the Red Lanterns who are working for Guy Gardner, they are basically losing this battle against Atrocitus. And so this is Skylox kind of feeling like that basically he is a failure. But getting back over to Guy Gardner and Blease, we actually do see them go back to their home world to do one last stand against Atrocitus and his army of Red Lanterns. Now, when they arrive, this is really more of Guy Gardner telling Blease, get out of here. The universe is big. Get away and hide from Atrocitus, because if he finds you, he will basically kill you. And right now, he only wants me. So I want you to just go ahead and leave me behind while I make one last stand against Atrocitus and his army on our old home world. But you did have Blease tell Guy Gardner that he is crazy, that she is going to stay behind with him to fight against the army of Red Lanterns. Now, they also have Shiko, and remember, Shiko was one of the new Red Lanterns who was basically a judge on this one particular world where she did judge against different people very fairly. But the problem was, though, her last case was about the prince of her homeworld, and she basically said because he was a murderer, he deserves to go to jail. But the king of the planet did not like the idea of his son going to jail, and so he had betrayed Shiko, tried to kill her. She got full of rage and became a Red Lantern. But she won't actually help out Guy Gardner because she said that right now she's just judging them. And so until she feels like Guy Gardner or Blease is actually not guilty, that they are actually innocent people, she is not going to jump in to help out Blease and Guy Gardner fight against the army of Red Lanterns that are on their way to attack them right now. But then we get into the final battle between Atrocitus and Guy Gardner. Now, when we do, we actually see the two characters beginning to fight against each other, but Atrocitus also has an army of Red Lanterns on his side to use against Guy Gardner and Blease. Now, luckily for Guy Gardner and Blease, you do have Rancor and also Skillocks appear to help out Guy Gardner and Blease fight against Atrocitus and his army of Red Lanterns. But while you have the two sides fighting against one another, Atrocitus does kill off Skillocks. And the reason why, because Skillocks had now betrayed Atrocitus twice. And so to Atrocitus, you may betray me once and I may forgive you, but if you betray me twice, then yeah, you deserve to die. And so basically you have Atrocitus kill off Skillocks. Now that is a huge loss for our heroes, but of course, they still got to continue on fighting against the army of Red Lanterns. But as the battle goes on, you did have Shiko decide that she had basically done enough or watched enough, and she can now fully judge Guy Gardner. And so we see that when it comes to Shiko, she basically realized that Guy Gardner is actually innocent. And with her kind of realizing that he is innocent and that he is someone worthy to actually fight with or fight for, she does use her powers to take out most of the Red Lantern army, or actually the entire army, to give Guy Gardner the chance to actually take down Atrocitus. And so when she does use her full power, yes, she is sacrificing herself. Yes, she does basically die, but it does give Guy Gardner and the rest of his group the actual chance to defeat Atrocitus. And so now it comes down to the final battle. Now, when it comes to the final battle between Atrocitus and Guy Gardner, it is actually a very pretty interesting battle. And what I mean by that is, when it comes to Guy Gardner and Atrocitus and their final battle between each other, at first, you do have Atrocitus beating down on Guy Gardner. Like Guy Gardner is actually losing the battle. But then you have Guy Gardner actually win the battle in a very interesting way. Now, something you have to remember is that when it comes to Guy Gardner's Red Lantern ring, it actually was Atrocitus' ring that Guy Gardner took away. But you also have to remember, when you receive a Red Lantern ring, it replaces your heart, meaning that if you do remove the ring, you basically die. And so you have Guy Gardner removing the ring that he had received from beating down on Atrocitus originally. And of course, he begins to die. But here comes the thing though. This is why I say it's Guy Gardner showing Atrocitus who is the better Red Lantern. Because you have Guy Gardner saying, listen, I may have got rid of your ring, but now I'm going to show you how much rage I actually have. And with all the rage he actually has, every single ring that belonged to the other Red Lanterns that were knocked out by Shiko earlier all go over to Guy Gardner. And so he has handfuls of Red Lantern rings to basically use against Atrocitus. But on top of that, he also takes the new ring that Atrocitus has that makes him a Red Lantern again. And which, when he does that, now Atrocitus is no longer a Red Lantern. Now with all the rings in his possession, you do have Guy Gardner realize that it's too much power for him to handle. And so what he actually does is rebuild the power battery for the Red Lanterns, but also bring back the Lake of Blood so that if there are new Red Lanterns out there, they'll be able to actually regain their sanity when they become a Red Lantern. Now, right after he does that, he does look like a normal person from Earth, but he does tell his group that, listen, you guys are still the protector of this sector of the universe. I'm going to go ahead and go back to Earth and basically help my people recover after being attacked by Atrocitus earlier in this storyline. And so it does seem like Guy Gardner is actually leaving the Red Lanterns for now, but he's still technically a Red Lantern. Now, this does lead into a storyline known as Future End. And Future End gave every single series a tie-in to kind of tell a story about a character or a team 5 years in the future. And so when it comes to Red Lanterns, their Future End book tie-in does pick up 5 years after this moment right here. But this is Guy Gardner showing us once again that he was actually able to defeat Atrocitus by showing him that he has more rage than Atrocitus has, that he is a better Red Lantern. But either way, this is where we are going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, I'll see y'all next time. Later.